Awaiting my confirmed status on this channel. Copy that. 10-0. Requesting spike count for dispatch.
The Combine are one of the greatest and most iconic antagonists in all of gaming. They're one of the enemy factions that inspired me to adopt the format of biological analysis in the first place. This happened, though, mostly as a result of the Combine synth units. In my original biological analysis of Half-Life 2, you can clearly tell my bias towards the synths, as I talk about them for much longer and mostly skim over the infantry. With that in mind, I've decided to cover the infantry units with better depth, trying my best to reference real-life sources. With that being said, let's start with the basics of what we know about the Combine. Following the 7-Hour War, the Combine quickly assimilated humanity into their empire. A majority of humans were simply made to be generic citizens, but many were either captured and forcefully modified or, most likely later into the Combine's occupation, willingly joined due to harsh living conditions. What they did with humans when they first started experimenting on them is pretty much unknown, but eventually they came upon the design that we now know as the transhuman. This is a science fiction concept which goes back as far as the 1940s, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, might even have roots in the Divine Comedy, with the word transhumanar being used to describe transcendence beyond human nature. And that's essentially what the idea is. It's to have transcended past a point of humanity while still being derived from humans. In Half-Life, all human-based units are based upon the same transhuman template, which is actually not that differential from humans, on the outside at least. They wear full-body uniforms, often with ballistics armor padding, and, most notably, a mask and helmet combo that shares a resemblance with many Soviet gas masks such as the PMG. This brings me to an interesting point about the Combine. As one would expect with any generic alien species, when they take over humanity, they would usually force their own tech upon those subjects, but in Half-Life 2, rather than adapting their own pre-existing technology to work on humans, they instead develop new technology based on already existing human designs. I find this to be interesting, as logically it makes sense, as the majority of the Combine forces without humans that we see are just synths. Putting a human into some kind of huge synth armor or replicating humans as synths, Fallout 4 reference, could be done, but would likely lead to more conflict. Rather, basing the Combine forces on designs made by humans would allow them to be viewed in a more positive light, even if that's a very small difference. This would also allow the Combine to more effectively propagandize themselves, which brings me to my next point of interest. The Combine are heavy users of propaganda. One would think that with all the openly outward evil that they have done, this wouldn't really be effective, and in a way, it's not. I find that, while maybe not its intended purpose, the posters produced by the Combine serve to unnerve the citizens of City 17, and other cities if we presume that they are present there as well. The reason I assumed this is because there's no other way the propaganda posters like this could really work. In a society where the entire planet is basically an openly violent police state, I don't think it would really matter if they had published these posters or not, with the only purpose they serve being to remind the inhabitants that they should submit to this state. Some posters are more deliberate about this. Some even use the inhuman appearances of the Vortigaunts against them to get people to report them. But a majority of these posters seem to be made in an attempt to get the citizens to glorify the Combine, which I just find weird, since in the Combine's position, it doesn't seem that trying to raise morale should be such a high priority. My only explanation for this could be that these posters are being made or commissioned by Dr. Breen himself, which would make sense considering his human nature. While Breen is at the head of the Combine that occupies Earth, he is only a figurehead. The Combine are, in truth, commanded by a hyper-advanced AI called Overwatch. Generally, when referring to generic Combine transhuman soldiers, they are called Overwatch soldiers because they have direct communications with Overwatch itself. However, the Civil Protection Forces presumably do not have access to these comms unless given for an express purpose, and thus Overwatch is generally manifested as a female voice that comes from some distant speaker giving coded orders to the Combine, and warnings to those that they may be pursuing. Overwatch, and by extension the Combine soldiers, will refer to humans that act outside of the Combine's preferred boundaries as anti-citizens. I find it an interesting choice that the Combine simply announces their tactics out loud to these anti-citizens, considering that experienced resistance members will start to learn the patterns that the Combine soldiers may exhibit, although it could serve as a form of intimidation, as even then, Combine soldiers are extremely difficult to combat. As I said, they are considered transhuman, meaning whatever is under all that armor of theirs is so far beyond what any human has ever been that they are no longer even considered human in the first place. They've gotten some major brain alterations, ones which have resulted in the complete erasure of their memories and loss of their emotions. They've even had their vocal cords physically replaced by a vocoder so as to communicate more effectively. Most depictions of what the Combine looked like on the inside are fan art, with our only example being this guy in Nova Prospect. But even then, we never see what their full cross-section looks like. All we know is that the process of creating an Overwatch soldier is often described as straight-up mutilation, with them having chunks of flesh, their entire abdomen, and even their reproductive organs removed for maximum combat efficiency. With the basics covered, let's start with the people who are arguably the most known part of the Combine, Civil Protection. Now, during the late Combine occupation, a human's entry into the Combine forces would be by joining the ranks of Civil Protection. If they did this, they were promised better living conditions, better food, and protection of their families. Once they did this, they were able to be assigned a uniform that was the standard for all Civil Protection units. This uniform consists of a black coat with 4 belts tied around it. The bottom 2 hold the jacket in place and have 2 radio-like devices, as well as a holster for either a 9mm pistol or a submachine gun. The top 2 hold a soft-armored, presumably ballistic vest. This armor definitely seems to be effective, as most Civil Protection can survive a good few 9mm body shots and still be in active combat before collapsing. By far the most complex part of the Civil Protection uniform is the helmet. It seems to be based off the Soviet PMG gas mask, which was uniquely designed to be compact. The Civil Protection variant seems to serve the same purpose, however, it also has a small communications array on the sides. This will allow it to communicate with other Combine units, however, it does not allow it, or selectively allows it, to access Overwatch. This is primarily for the sake of not allowing humans who have been fully assimilated to learn of the Combine's plans. Now, the jacket is likely made out of a synthetic material that the Combine has synthesized, possibly something similar to nylon. It has 2 front pockets on the bottom and 2 zippable pockets on the arms. It also has a City 17 Civil Protection armband on its right arm. Its vest seems to be a soft ballistic armor vest, covering up only the torso and not the abdomen. The material that it directly uses to block bullets is likely to be some kind of Kevlar. As I said before, the Combine infantry employ the tactics that the humans already used, just better, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Combine bulletproof vests were simply using the same materials that humans used, but more efficiently in some way. The back of the vest is one large plate armor, however the front is shaped in this odd pattern that I'm not sure of the purpose of. Regardless, the overall vest definitely helps when absorbing bullet impacts, but it's not the only part that helps with this. The mask that the Civil Protection unit utilizes is actually pretty good at defending against bullets. Now, this may also have something to do with the stimulants that Civil Protection units are said to be provided with, but they can take a good few headshots with 9mm before they can no longer operate. For a human, this is most obviously not normal, and so I would assume that the mask is made from a kind of hard ballistic armor. Now, the mask has 2 attachments, a voice diaphragm and a filter. The voice diaphragm seems to be some kind of voice coder, as we can see the voices of the Metro Police are very clearly distorted. I would assume that this is for the purpose of allowing them to speak clearly even when injured, and to speak loud above crowds. It may also serve to keep the Metro Police anonymous in case they happen to offend any anti-citizen groups. The civil protection themselves don't really utilize any real tactics to any effective extent. I assume they definitely do have training, but that training is likely eroded over time, as the majority of all situations they are needed in are regarding unarmed citizens. This all changes though when a civil protection unit gets promoted. See, when any given Metro Cop is doing well at their job, they can be promoted to one of the transhuman units. This is presumably unwilling, as you would really have to lose basically everything about yourself that makes you human. Once a unit has been chosen, they can be promoted to a variety of these units, one of the most common being the Combine Grunts. The Grunts seem to be a kind of in-between unit, being a transhuman Combine unit but not entirely. We know this because upon being stripped of its gas mask, we see a variety of wires and metal. The Combine Grunts are essentially sent in for situations where Metro Police would be unable to get involved, but where a military presence is unneeded. We see that this unit's uniform is a bodysuit, which points more toward its transhuman nature, as it would have no need to fully remove its uniform. Around it is a single tool belt which holds a pouch and 2 magazine holsters. Moving up, it has a utility belt going along its chest which holds up to 2 grenades. On its back, it has some kind of propane or oxygen tank above its backpack. Why it needs this, I do not know, but what I do know is that if you shoot it on this red cap here, it explodes. Now looking closely at the suit, it seems to be made out of a durable metal, possibly similar to what some modern day hazardous materials suits are made out of. It also has these 3 lines here, which I don't know the function of. I don't know why they're there. They're probably just there for texture, I'm gonna be honest. The gloves are generic workers' gloves, but with enhanced knuckles for better combat at close quarters. Looking at its gas mask, we see that it has an extra filter, which makes sense considering its use in the quarantine zone. It also has what appears to be a user interface within the lenses of the mask, which may allow for more detailed information from Overwatch, or better visual confirmation of threats. We can also assume that these holes on the side of its head are what allows it to hear. On the inside parts that we get to see of the Grunt, we see that its eyes are actually not present, being replaced by the lenses themselves. This likely significantly enhances their vision. Additionally, we see a metal faceplate built into the Grunt's inner face, which is likely to be some kind of structural support. On the back of its head, it has 2 scars, which I would assume are from surgery, or from the helmet being implanted into the head. Overall, this unit is how an individual may fully enter the Combine Overwatch. However, to see real military application, we would have to turn to the Combine Soldier. The Combine Soldier is the most utilized unit in the Combine ranks. It has completely lost any emotion, which has been replaced by strategic knowledge that was forcefully implanted into its brain. It comes in 2 primary variations, the Standard and the Shotgun. Both of these units are largely identical, with the only difference being the difference in eye color and armor color, and of course, weapon. The Combine Soldier is almost entirely covered in layers of soft ballistic armor plating, although there may be hard armor inside the vest that we simply cannot see. In fact, it appears that it wears some kind of jacket made from this material, with its real clothing being a full-body durable cloth suit, similar to that of the Grunt. The design of its helmet is simple and functional, with the gas mask, voice diaphragm, comm system, and blue lenses, and that's pretty much it. I mean, in all honesty, there's really nothing special about this unit. I assume that it's the baseline for all Combine transhuman units, and thus, it's really as basic of a unit as it can be. With that simplicity though comes terror, as this unit is simply extremely proficient at all kinds of killing. A Combine unit with a more specialized utilization is our next one, the Combine Suppressor. Hello, okay, so you're probably wondering what that was. This video is getting a lot longer than I thought it would be, and so I'm sad to say that I'm going to cut this video short because I already delayed this video once and I'm not doing it again. And I'd also like to dedicate more time to analyzing Wallhammer in particular. If you somehow hadn't guessed, they're my favorite of the bunch. So the plan is I'm going to upload part 1 now and part 2 next Friday, and the Friday after that I'll upload some kind of definitive edition combining the 2. With that being said, Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next part. And goodbye.